Okay,
Hel-
cool.
Excellent. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Love Fruit podcast. And today we've really got a legend of the fruitarian movement, someone that probably a lot of people have seen or heard of, but someone also that to some degree keeps himself to himself and lives his own life and doesn't really get involved in some of the dramas that go on online and at fruit festivals and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to hopefully learn more about our guest today, Mango Wodsak. And for all of you that don't know, when I was getting into this fruitarian idea, Mango was in a film called Pure Fruit, which you can still see online. And you can check out Pure Fruit. It's a very, very good film. And he's also written books. He had a blog and a number of other things. So I'm sure a lot of you have maybe seen him in the film or read his books. And Mango, is there anything else you want me to say in introduction to you?
No, I think you covered the basics there. The film Pure Fruit that was made 10 years ago this year, I think it will be 10
Hmm.
years that it was made. Lots changed since then, and of course, as you've mentioned, I've written actually 4 books since the making of that movie, and we found a beautiful spot, piece of paradise here in tropical far north Queensland of Australia. So we're very happy, and as you say, I'm very much a recluse. Um, Me and my wife don't tend to mix much really or socialize much. We kind of stay at home, play in the garden, write a lot. Just basically keep to ourselves. We don't want any drama. I don't mind doing
Nice.
the occasional inch. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So, well, let's go back to let's to introduce you a bit more. Let's talk about your story, if you're okay with that. And did you start out?
Of course.
Were you growing up? Were you brought up as a vegan, a vegetarian, anything else? How was your beginnings in that?
Oh, pretty much standard, bog standard, meat and 2 veg diet
Hmm.
growing up.
Hmm.
Um, Very kind of a normal in the sense of that's how things were back then. Um, it was not until I reached the age of about 26 or 27 that I had a sudden realization that for the all of my life up until that period, that moment, I had been eating the flesh of dead animals, and it kind of really shocked me because I kind of, everybody knows that bacon comes from a pig and
Hmm.
steak comes from a cow, but up until that point, I hadn't really honestly made the connection. And when I did, it really hit me like a day wearing new shoes. I, I couldn't understand why I hadn't seen it before.
Right.
So at that point, I cut out all flesh products from my diet. And within a few months of that awakening, I realized that animals were still being abused in order to steal their milk and their eggs. So about maybe 6 to 8 months after becoming vegetarian, I quit all animal products and made that firm and committed step to being vegan the rest of my life. Um,
And
and
you
then,
were
yeah, go on.
and you were brought up in England?
I grew up in England. I left England the day before my 21st birthday.
Right.
Um, and I've not lived there since.
Hmm.
So I've spent more time out of England than I have there. But obviously, I've been back and forth a few times, although not at all in the last 14 years or something. Um, and I probably won't go back again. I honestly feel that I've found my home now. I love my uh, space that I have here. I love what we're creating, and I have absolutely no desire to travel anywhere. So I probably would never leave Australia and probably never leave Queensland. I,
Fantastic.
I don't see that happening. Yeah,
Excellent,
yeah,
excellent. We'll maybe get to that a little bit later. So what
sure.
took you on the path towards fruitarian diet rather than just the vegan diet? And was there any particular people or books or people that inspired you, anything like that?
Yeah, there were a few. I got the message a few times and never really kind of registered with me what it meant. But then in 1992, I went to one of the international vegan festivals that was happening in Biggleswade in Bedfordshire in England. It was, and there was a man named Francisco Martin. He was a Spanish fellow, and he had scheduled to give a talk on raw food. And yeah, I think his talk was like 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. And I remember lying there in the sunshine on the grass, listening to him, and suddenly I started tuning into what he was saying, and I thought, wow, this guy, he just makes so much sense. Everything he's saying just really hit me as being purely rational, and just kind of shook me really, because I realized I was experiencing another revelation. And from that moment on, I decided, well, I'm cutting out cooked food. That was not as easy as I had optimistically thought to begin with, because I suddenly realized how diabolically addictive cooked food actually is.
Right.
So it was not something that I was able to do overnight, although I did try. I had sincere efforts to do so, but it took me some years. Anyway, I think it was only 1 year later that a friend of mine and we were sitting talking about fruit, and we both came to this realization that fruit was the only food that was actually given karmically freely. And that's what set me up on my path to fruitarianism. So I'd been experimenting with raw food for a year, and that's when the fruit realization hit me. And I mean, obviously, again, I'm not going to try and kid anybody or kid myself that I managed to switch overnight to eating only fruit, because that was not the case. But I certainly had it in my mind all the time, and I saw it as a valid goal which I worked towards.
And were there any other kind of fruitarians at the time? Like I know Anne Osborne is from England as well. I don't know if she was around or anyone else at the round.
Yeah, funnily enough, I met Anne Osborne in the early 90s, not long after that time. And I think she had the same kind of realization at around about the same time. There was a guy living in Leicester who was called David Shelley. Wrote a wonderfully inspirational book called
Fruit, the Food and Medicine of Man, or something like that. Is it?
Yeah, I think no. That's Maurice Crock, isn't it? Was that his?
Yeah.
Was that Maurice Crock?
Yeah. So this
David Shelley wrote. Momentarily slipped my mind. If it pops back in, I'll let you know later on.
Yeah, the one I was talking about was Maurice Crock. Sorry, yeah, Fruit, the Food and Medicine from Man. Yeah.
David Shelley's book is not very well known. It was not. I don't think you were able to find it online. Although I do believe my good friend Jamshed is trying to get it republished.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think it's well. I think I've only really heard of it because of Anne Osborne talking about it, and I've never been able to find it really. But yeah.
No, it's a wonderful little book. Yeah, It's one of the first books I read after kind of awakening to the idea of living on fruit. David Shelley's book was there, kind of just reached me at that same time. And Anne Osborne I met, I'm not sure exactly when it was, but around 1995 or something. I was taking part in a sleep deprivation experiment in Essex.
With Tony Wright, is that?
Absolutely, with Tony Wright. You've met Tony Wright?
Yes.
Yeah.
Both Anne and Tony have been at the festival that I put on.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I guess they probably would do that. Makes sense. Both there. And Anne gets around. I know she moves around to a lot of the festivals and things. Yeah. But apart from that, I was really kind of isolated at the time when I had these realizations, and I was living in a country where I didn't know any other people that were even living on a plant-based diet,
Sure,
let
sure,
alone
sure.
eating raw or eating fruits. So I was kind of struggling myself with it. Yeah.
So, did you have any concerns like about the nutrition side of it, or did you just fully have faith in it from the first time you thought about it?
You know what? When I first became vegetarian, I had swallowed a lot of that brainwashing about nutrition, and there was a part of me that was slightly concerned about calcium and protein and
Hmm.
things. And I did a lot of research back then. I had a lot of books. I had some books on the essential amino acids that we need, the 9 or 10 of them that there are, and I actually studied them so sort of in depth that I knew the name of each one of those amino acids
Yeah.
and could tell you where to find them and what they were good for. But I kind of, at a certain stage, I had this, again, an awakening, I would call it, that I realized that, well, if uh, vegetarianism, or if becoming vegetarian or becoming vegan or raw vegan was progress from what I was doing before, which I strongly believe that it was, then it seemed to me to make intrinsic sense that I shouldn't need to be concerned about any nutritional aspect of it at all, because I was actually improving things as I went along. So it
Hmm.
wasn't like, yeah, it seems to me like to fall into that trap of thinking, well, where do I get this or where do I get that? When I had never done that in the past, when I was eating everything and on a terrible diet,
Yes.
it didn't make any sense to me. So yeah, I soon pushed that away. It was only in the first initial year or two that I was into that side of things, and I knew a lot of it. I was pretty well read on most of that stuff. But nowadays, my philosophy is just forget it all. If you're truly trying to get a back to nature lifestyle and live the way that we should be living, then none of that really matters. It's all it's all
Yeah.
a distraction on the forward path.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So let's go further down that timeline. Obviously, the light came on when you
Yep.
were starting to meet these people and think about it yourself. You moved out of the UK. Where did you go after that?
I back when this was so I was born in 1961, and in 1982, one day before my 21st birthday, I got a job as a um, working with mainframe computers in Germany.
Hmm.
So I moved to Germany. That was in a town called Worms, near Frankfurt.
Hmm.
And I lived there for roughly 2.5 years. Um, and that's at that point, I think the company I was working for, they decided that they were going to uh, relocate to France. So they offered me a job to move to France with them, or to do whatever I wanted to do, move on. And I had really kind of grown to see Germany as my home, and I really loved it there. I had a good set of friends, and I just loved living in Germany. So I decided that I would not take up their offer, but
Hmm.
find a job elsewhere in Germany, which I did. I found a job in a place called Paderborn. This, but I had like 3 months before I was going to start work with them, and I happened to notice an old advert for a job at this scientific research institute in Norway. And on the off chance that job might still be available, even though the advert was already, like, I don't know, it was already 5 or 6 months old maybe. I wrote them a letter and said, look, I'm interested in this job that's advertised. I know the job is old, but just wondering whether or not it's available. And I didn't really expect anything would become of it, but they pretty much immediately wrote me back and said, yes, look, um, when can you come for an interview? And they sent me a plane ticket almost straight away. And on the day that I got there, they offered me a job.
Hmm.
So it was a total kind of surprise to me, but I ended up living in Scandinavia, in Norway, on the west coast. And that's where I spent most of my time after leaving Germany. Was and that's where I kind of woke up to and became a vegan, and it turned to the raw food lifestyle. Many things happened at that time. A lot of big changes in my life. Towards the end, I totally quit that line of work that I was on and became a vagabond instead, and started sort of doing my own thing.
So,
Uh,
is this when you started to travel to? Because I believe there was a point where you were traveling in Southeast Asia and places like that.
yeah, that kind of a bit further on in the movie. That
Right.
was.
Okay.
I did. I what happened was that I left Norway on my push bike,
Oh
uh,
wow.
and I I. Well, this is a funny story actually, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit more. But when I was about 18 years old, uh, back in the UK, they were debating whether or not to bring back conscription. Um, and I was at work one day, and they were debating it in Parliament. And one of the guys, who's a bit of a prankster that I was working with, he came into us, and we were a bunch of lads there, and he said, "Look, they've just decided that they're going to bring back conscription." So that kind of shook me, because I thought, I don't want to serve in the army. That's not something that sounds like I want to, something I want to do. So I decided there and then that I'm leaving England, and I'm going to run away, because I don't want to be any part of this. So anyway, I got home, and I kind of went straight to Mum and told her that I was leaving. I said, "Look, I'm not staying." And she said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well," and I told her about the conscription, and she said, "Oh, they decided not to bring it back." So the guy had been having us on. It was a joke, but it's relevant to the story, because back when I was living in Norway, there was a whole bunch of things which kind of led to me wanting to become a Norwegian citizen, which I did do. And one of the things which I had not at all thought about was the fact that Norway still has conscription.
Oh wow.
So I became a Norwegian citizen after living there for, I think, 6 or 7 years or something. And then the next thing I know is I'm getting papers in the post saying you got to come for your military checkup to see if you're fit enough to join the military.
Oh
And
wow.
uh, so what had happened before as a prank, it actually happened to me in real life. And once more, I decided, well, this is it. I can't stay. So I up and left, and on my bicycle, and I've not been back since. And I'm probably, as I mentioned earlier, I'm probably never going to leave Australia again anyway. But I started biking, and cutting a long story short, because lots of things happen, and I'm kind of covering all of this in my biography. I've written the first half of it, which covers the first 31 years, up until the point where just before I woke up to raw food, um, and I ended up in Australia. And I had a 3-year visa, which
Hmm.
they don't give very often. But I got it because I pleaded with the Australian embassy and told them that I was going to be biking around Australia, and I needed to have more than just a normal 1-year visa, because I wanted to take my time doing it. So they granted me a 3-year, a 4-year visa, actually, 4-year visa,
I would have
and
thought. I
I
would
ended
have.
up.
Sorry, I would have thought that if someone said I'm going to come in and I'm going to bike around the country, I would have thought that that would be a reason they would feel like not giving you the visa for saying that, because it's like this person's never going to leave. So you know, so it seems like they're very kind to you
Yeah,
then.
I think they were. I mean, maybe it was the way I worded my letter. I told them that I was biking around the world for peace,
Oh
and
wow.
I wanted to bike around Australia, um, and I needed more than just a year. And they gave it to me. I think they only give out a handful of them every year, and whether or not things would be different today, probably they would be. but back then, in 1997, this was.
But where were you,
They let me.
where were you in your sort of raw foods journey then? Were you in Norway? Were you on a raw food diet, or what's the picture
Yeah,
there?
Norway is where I woke up to things, raw food and fruit really. So I started eating raw food in Norway, predominantly raw food. So anybody that uses the excuse of, "Oh, I can't do that, I'm living in a cold climate," they're just making excuses, because I was living in Norway. It's one of the coldest countries in the world.
Yeah, right.
Very wet and rainy where I was living. And nowadays, with the infrastructure of bringing food in from everywhere, it's not that difficult to eat raw food wherever you are in
Sure.
the world. Especially if you're living in a large town or a city. Gets more difficult when you're out in a rural area where there's not so much around
Mhm.
to eat. But yeah, so I woke up to eating raw. I woke up to the idea of fruitarianism in Norway. And when I set off on my bicycle, I was kind of fully into that raw. It was like really a fruit that was such a big part of who I was.
So
Yeah.
how did you get from Norway to Australia on a bike?
Uh, yeah, I kind of, things don't always go as planned. And I ended up, I think I biked about 5,000 kilometers from where I started in Norway to just just above the Spanish border
Oh
in the
wow.
French Pyrenees.
Yeah.
And I ended up at this like community there, and it was coming up to. I'd been traveling for about a year, and I had told them there how I felt about how difficult it had been the previous winter when I was biking through the winter.
Hmm.
And I was persuaded to stay in that community throughout the winter before I carried on. But I ended up living there for 3 years. Um, and it's a long story, Ronnie. It's a long story, but
Sure.
after 3 years
Well,
of being there, I kind of, that's when I contacted, other things happened, but I contacted the Australian embassy and took a flight from, I went back to England first and took a flight from England over to Australia.
and
Yeah.
was it when you were in Australia that you kind of fully committed to just fruit?
No, if I'm going to be really honest about it, I always struggled. There were periods where I went through eating only fruit, um, months at a time sometimes, but then I would fall back and I would eat lettuce or carrots or other things. And even worse, I would fall back and eat some rice or something. And I never felt good about myself doing that. And I never tried to make excuses that what I was doing was okay. I think in a way, I gave myself a hard time about it.
Hmm.
But I always knew that one day I would achieve 100% fruit, and I never lost that goal. I never lost that dream. And when it was in 2000, and this was after after my Australian experience, that was when I ended up in Southeast Asia and traveling there. But ultimately, I ended up living back in Europe, in Spain actually. And yeah, I, I what was it? Let's think what happened then really. Yeah, I kind of I actually was living in Spain with the intention of learning Spanish so that I could uh, travel to South America and possibly find myself a home in South America, and that was my dream. And I'd accomplished step one, learning Spanish, at least rudimentary. I still don't, I never spoke exceptionally good Spanish, but I spoke enough to get by. And I knew that it would improve if I did start traveling in South America or Central America. But before that plan panned out, I started getting emails from my partner Květa,
Hmm.
who's from the Czech Republic originally, but has been living. She escaped the Czech Republic during communist regime, and ended up living here in Australia. And she also has been eating fruit since 1986, so
Oh
far
wow.
longer than I. And she kind of loved what I was writing on my blog back then, on my website. And she thought, wow, I really got to connect with this guy. And eventually, through a lot of hard work on her side, she persuaded me to come over to Australia. And that's since we've been together, that's where I've not looked back really, and just eaten fruit. It's been so much easier having someone else, and it was not at all difficult. Once I was with her, like all the cravings or uh, uh, all the difficulties, they just dissipated. It just
Wow.
makes it so much easier being with somebody else. Because I think a lot of the time, it was really just, I think, me not being in the right frame of mind and not in the right space for doing it, being too much on my own,
Yeah.
which is what was happening in Spain. I was just on my own all the time, and your mind plays tricks with you, and yeah.
Sure.
So it's been very good. We've been together, and it's now since 2006, yeah, living in Australia, and I've got citizenship here now. So
Excellent. So
yeah.
you were putting out this blog, and was that where the people who made the film, did they find you through that?
Emil is the guy who made the movie,
Yeah.
and he was traveling in South America, and he ran into a young German fellow who his name was Julian, and he was fascinated by the fact that Julian was eating only raw food, and he asked Julian if he would mind if he made a documentary about him for his thesis. At the time, Emil was studying film and needed to make this documentary for as part of his thesis. And Julian said to him, look, I've only just really started, but if you if you want to, you should contact Mango. And he and I had met each other uh, a few years earlier in Australia. We were both traveling in Australia, and I'd inspired him to go on this raw food journey. And so he told Julian, get in touch with Mango because he's been doing it longer. So I got an email one day from Emil, who asked me if I would be up for making this movie, and it just so happened to coincide really well. I told him that I was waiting to get my permanent residency in Australia, and up until that point, I didn't really think it was the right time, and we were going to be, but I was expecting to get it very soon. And then we were going to take a road trip from Sydney up to Far North Queensland, where we would hopefully find our home. So he jumped at this idea. He said, "Road trip movie, great idea. Let's do this." And so he pretty much arranged. He came over together with the cameraman David, and the two of them accompanied us for I think it's 2 weeks or something, maybe 1 week, maybe it was just 1 week. Anyway, he and David and Krita and I, they hired a car. We had our car, or we packed it. They were with us in Sydney as we were leaving. They interviewed neighbours and that were hanging around,
Yeah.
and they were behind us all the way up or in front of us. We had mobile phones, so we were keeping in touch. So they were able to film.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's a great little film as well. I mean, even if someone wasn't interested in the fruitarian diet, it's a really well put together little film.
He did a wonderful job, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
He did a wonderful job. Yeah.
Because as you're
With
saying,
no sort of agenda to make us look silly or anything. It was.
yeah,
I think he did a really good job.
yeah,
Kudos to him.
and there was so many there is so many parts to it, as you're saying, the fact that you were getting your citizenship, the traveling to Queensland, your relationship to some extent, and the people that were around you. And I think that there's some really great moments in the film. One of them I'm thinking about is you have a kind of debate with Harley Durian Rider and Freely, and you were hanging out with them. And it's interesting because you were kind of polar. You're kind of doing a very similar diet at the time, I guess, but very polar opposites in kind of how you were approaching it and how you were doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's true.
So how did all that happen? Were you all at the same place? Was it a meetup, or what was it?
No, Harley had arranged this festival that we didn't know about really. I don't think we'd been aware about it when we came up. It just happened to coincide that when we got here to Far North Queensland, into the tablelands where we live in, there's a place called Fruitopia not far from where we live in, and he had arranged this gathering, and I think it was just over when we got there. So we didn't take part in it. It was finished, but there were a few people that were still hanging around, including Harley and Freely. So yeah, that wasn't the first time that I'd ran into Harley. I'd met him a couple of times before that. Both in Thailand, actually. I'd met him in Thailand in 2004, and I met him again in Thailand no, it was not 2000. I'm not 100% sure of the dates, but yeah, I met him twice anyway in Thailand before that. So he wasn't a new face to me. And as you say, we did have very different ideas, and I think we're very different people. So he's much more of an extrovert, whereas I'm kind of very introvert, really.
Sure. There's also a bit in the film where there's a guy who's eating raw meat, and it's like rotten meat and stuff like that, and he looks really sick, and I think he has to be taken to hospital as well. What was the background around that?
Yeah, when we got there, he was very sick, Ian. He was the person that was looking after Fruitopia, where the festival was being held. And when we got there, it was just him, just Ian was there. But then these other people started rocking in, like Harley and Freely, and a guy called Ryan from Canada. A few other people there coming and going. But yeah, Ian had some, I think it was some kind of abscess on his throat, was it? I can't remember exactly what it was he had. But whatever it was he had, I think he was having trouble swallowing any food,
Right.
even liquid. He was in a very, very bad state. I remember I took him to hospital. I'm not sure if that was after the movie or during the movie, but I took him to Mariba Hospital on his request, and they drained the abscess and enabled him to drink and eat again. So he sort of partially recovered, but we see things very differently. Obviously, I got on very well with Ian, surprisingly, considering the fact that we were so different in what we were eating. I got on better with Ian than I did with Harley, I think. He was kind of more. I felt like he was more on my level.
Sure.
But yeah, so Ian and I, we had a lot of chats, and we're never going to see eye to eye about things. He just thinks the whole world is a killing machine and uses that as an excuse that it's okay for him to eat the way he does. And he's moved down to Townsville, where he takes care of his mum now. That's the last I've heard from him. So we don't keep in touch at all. But yeah. He's got two brothers that eat the same way as well. And when I did see him, he was really just eating. He was surviving on unpasteurized cow milk, raw eggs, chicken, raw chicken, raw butter, I think sometimes, and this sort of moldy minced meat that he would eat.
Yeah. And it's kind of, there's all sorts of weird diets out there, I guess. But what was the kind of reaction? Did you get much reaction to that film? Did you get many people messaging you about it? Do people still message you about it?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, people still talk about Pure Fruit. It's still quite one of those videos that kind of still being shown. People still watching it, and especially since I started writing books as well, people will go back and watch a Pure Fruit or tell me they've watched it, and a lot of good feedback from there from watching the movie. Yeah, so I think it's certainly been part of us becoming more well known by the public was the Pure Fruit movie.
Sure.
And I've actually offered Emil that he should come back and do a follow-up, so he can kind of like see how things happened, or what happened afterwards, and maybe get the message out more about what the whole fruitarian things are really all about. And he's kind of open to the idea, but he's just really busy with other things. Maybe
Sure.
one day, you never know.
Sure.
Yeah,
It would be nice to see that for
yeah,
sure. Um,
yeah. It would be, yeah.
I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but is he not the same person? Did he do the documentary of the Woodstock Fruit Festival? So I got the feeling it might have been the same person, but maybe that's wrong.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think he was offered to do it, but I thought that I didn't realize it happened. I'm so out of it, really. I was not aware that there was a Woodford Fruit Festival documentary.
Oh yeah, it's years ago though. It was 2012 or 13 maybe even that it came
Okay.
out.
You
But
know,
yeah.
I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, it could be.
So anyway, let's get to obviously in the film you go over your own definition of fruitarianism. So what does fruitarianism mean to you, and why is it something different or more appealing to you than just a raw food diet?
Yeah. As I kind of said, really, the beginnings of my journey really were all about ethics and waking up to the fact that I didn't want to hurt anyone. I I just that's where it all started for me, really. And the journey to fruitarianism was no different. It was also about trying to minimize harm. So when I had the realization that that well, let's put it, I'd always assumed that there was a certain aspect of this world that was unavoidably live and let die. That
Mm,
there was no way around that. That no matter how we went about our lives, we were always going to be causing the death of other life forms. And although I understand still that it's incredibly difficult, if not by near impossible, to not cause any harm at all, um, by focusing on trees as a source of food, we cause the least harm as possible. And the least harm that we cause, the more we empower others to do likewise. We influence and empower others to do likewise. So I
sure.
think that that's where it all started with me, really, is just thinking, well, fruit is not like other foods. If you pull out a carrot from the ground, you are ending the life of the carrot plant
Mhm.
um, by eating the root, which is basically, without the root, the plant can't live.
Yeah.
If you cut off the head of a cabbage, you are ending the cabbage life. You're
Mhm.
not giving the cabbage a chance to go to seed and to self-seed and carry on. But if you go to an apple tree and you take an apple from um, the tree is still alive, and it actually is benefiting the tree that you take the apple, because if you really enjoy the apple and think, wow, this is really sweet, yummy apple, you're more likely to take care of the seeds or disperse the seeds in a conscious way, such that they have a way to
Sure.
grow a new tree.
Sure.
So you're helping in the procreation. It's a symbiotic pact
Yeah.
between you and the fruit tree. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I love that idea, and I just felt like the world really is. I think if you're focusing on spirituality in life, um, the world is about trying. Yeah, spirituality is about trying to do less harm, and I think that if you trying to do less harm, you can't be harming yourself by doing less harm. So it just seemed to all make sense to me in some way. And I don't think that I'm missing out on anything by eating only fruit.
So a big
I've
question
never.
that, sorry.
Yep.
Well,
I just said I've never thought that.
yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely. What I wanted to,
Yeah.
I think people might be curious, what do you eat in a day? Like, what do you have a routine? Do you have certain things you eat every day, or does it change all the time? What does it look like, your diet?
There are some things that change because fruit comes and goes in season. So some things are in season and others aren't. Like mangoes, pretty much mangoes we only eat during mango season. And when they are in season, we'll eat lots and lots of them. Then there's grapes or nectarines that might come into season, so we eat those. And then once they've gone, we'll eat whatever comes next. But that aside, we do have a sort of pattern. I think it's good to have a routine in life. And I'm very much a creature of habit, so I very much follow the pattern that I'm waking up. Like I wake up in the morning between 3 and 4 o'clock normally, and I pretty much get out of the house and go for a swim first thing in the morning before I do anything. At the moment I'm swimming about half a kilometer every morning.
Oh, wow.
And then I'll come in and I'll start making juices for the day, which I don't drink straight away, but I'm making juices. I spend an hour or so making juices for myself and Květa for us to drink throughout the day, and I put them in the fridge and we'll drink them. And normally I make maybe half a liter of cucumber and tomato juice. I think that's the one thing that we drink pretty much all year round. Cucumber and tomato juice. So we have a stable. It's a staple thing that we're taking every day. At the moment, I'm making another half a liter of grapefruit juice. Of grape juice for the two of us. So it's a half a liter each, and then another half a liter of pineapple and orange. And we put those in the fridge, and we generally start to eat around about 11 o'clock or midday. I might have a little drink or something before then, but generally speaking, not much these days. I'm pretty much wait until that time before I start eating. Greta she doesn't eat at all really until at least 11 o'clock. So we'll sit down at that time. I'll start off by drinking my juices, my cucumber juice, and then we both sit and eat a bowl of salad, which is made from grated cucumber, tomatoes, zucchini, avocado.
Oh, wow.
And then after we've had that, I might have the orange juice from the morning that I made, and yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. And then I've stopped eating by the time it's 3 o'clock. Normally, I won't eat anything more for the rest of the day.
All right, okay. Do either of you, do you not grow some of your own fruit and things like that? And do you eat any of it off the trees?
Absolutely. We got more and more because when we moved into this place, there wasn't really much going. There were jackfruit trees that were there.
Oh, wow.
And we're getting jackfruit from the trees, so we eat our own jackfruit.
Wow.
Which really good because I think there's about maybe 8 jackfruit trees or something, and that's yummy fruit to be getting. We've got mango trees. When the mangoes are in season, we're getting plenty of mangoes. We go and pick them. We've got a variety called Asian Queen, which is just super sweet and super yummy. We've got also, when we moved into the place, it was long grass that was sort of like as tall as me everywhere. But that's all gone now, and we've got I put gardens in everywhere and put fruit trees everywhere. So we've got ackee trees, we've got Rollinia, We got bananas everywhere. We got papaya. We got figs, fig trees. With a lot of these with things. We've got avocado trees. Several avocado trees. We've got some small durian trees which don't do anything because it's too dry here, and they're only maybe 2 or 3 foot high. But maybe the climate might change one day. That's my optimistic thinking always. So you never know. They're in there waiting for the climate to change.
Oh wow!
They might take off one day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is there any particular reason that you choose to juice your fruit? Is it just more practical for you, or any other reason?
No, I think both of us kind of prefer really to drink rather than to eat.
Hmm.
It's maybe just part of where we're at in terms of eating. That it just seems easier to just drink.
Right. Okay.
Um, Enjoy it more. I think that
Yeah.
nowadays, we eat things because not we don't kind of look at things and think, well, this has got fats, or this has got sugars, or
Mm,
this has got carbohydrates, or whatever.
mm.
We're not 80-10-10ers in, although we might be because we have got really no idea what it means. Um, we're just people that like to eat our foods because it tastes nice. So we eat
Excellent.
things that appeal to us,
Yeah.
and that's all. We don't worry about anything else. Whatever
Excellent.
appeals at the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
the
So
juices
so
appeal.
yeah, and um, I want to ask you about durian because you know
Yeah,
it's in the film a little bit. Durian seems to be for a lot of fruitarians. They seem to put it above other fruits almost, or they see it as kind of special. And definitely, when you see people sharing, if you've got people eating fruit together and a durian turns up like a really good one, the mood kind of changes a little bit. It feels like sometimes. I think you also said that you lived on durian for like a couple of weeks or something. So
I did. Yeah, I did.
tell us about your relationship to that fruit, and do you think it's particularly special in any way?
I'll tell you. I mean, before I came to Australia back in 1997, the first time I came here, I had heard there used to be a guy that ran it was called the Fruitarian Network magazine. His name was
Hmm.
Rene Beresford, and
Hmm.
he was a great kind of central point for fruitarians to connect back in the 80s and 90s, mostly in the 1990s. And yeah, he wrote in his little kind of magazine that he produced about all these tropical fruits like chocolate pudding fruit, which we have in the back garden too. It's another one we've got.
Mm.
Chocolate pudding fruit and durian and jackfruit, which I'd never tried, and a whole bunch of other things, yellow sapotes and white sapotes, which we also have in the back garden. We've got lots of things actually. When I come to think of it, we've got all these things coming. A lot of them aren't giving fruit yet, but I'm getting sidetracked. The durian, um, I'd heard about them, and I knew that people valued them very highly. Fruitarians valued them very highly. And the first day that I got here to Australia, I got off of the plane and I biked 100 kilometers from the airport north. I was looking for a good friend of mine called Jeff. He wasn't a friend at the time. I'd never met him, but we contacted each other through this magazine of
Hmm.
Renee's, and he'd invited me to come and stay where he was out there. And I got into this valley, into this tropical rainforest valley where he was living. And I'd gone to this one house where I knew that I could get information about his whereabouts. And there was this beautiful, I would say really, like, for me, it was intoxicatingly beautiful aroma on the front porch of this house. And I just thought it was tropical rainforest or some flowers or
Mm.
something. I didn't know what it was. And this girl that was there, I was asking her about Jeff, and he said, Jeff's another couple of kilometers away. Maybe if you're lucky, you might catch him because he moves around a lot. Um, and then she said to me, have you tried durian? And I said, no, I haven't. I've never seen one. And said, would
Wow.
you like to try one? And I said, yeah, I would love to try one. And at that point, just not far from where we were sitting, she walked over on the veranda. There was a pile of durian.
Oh wow.
I had totally not seen them, or if I had, I my mind had blocked them out because I didn't know what they were. And she got one of these durians, and she brought it over, and she split it open, and I realized at that point that this beautiful aroma that I'd been intoxicated by was coming from the durian fruit. And I
Mm.
I I tried. She gave me a piece, and I put it on my tongue, and it was like heaven. It was like the most special thing that I'd ever tasted in my whole life. I'd never tasted anything that came remotely close to being uh, as satisfying and as tasty as durian. So I was immediately in love with it. I couldn't get enough of it afterwards. I want more and more durian. And that's why after I left and I was traveling through Southeast, after I left Australia and was traveling through Southeast um, Asia, durian was so cheap over there and so affordable for me as a Westerner that I was living on it. As I have mentioned, that I went for 2.5 weeks eating nothing but durian in Sumatra, and
Wow.
I never got bored of it. I just thought it was just, I would look forward every morning to going out and get durian. I was drinking water much more than I normally would because I didn't drink water for hardly any water. But after I when I was eating the durian, I was having to drink a lot more water. So it was very dehydrating, but I still loved it. Uh, my relationship with durian has changed over the years, and quite recently, Greta and I went and bought a few boxes of durian. Just we just kind of like hadn't had any for a long time, and we pigged out on durian every day for a few days, and both of us felt extremely dehydrated afterwards, and both of us felt kind of a bit sluggish. So we really, well, we both came to the conclusion that it probably wasn't the best fruit that we should be eating because
Mm.
it wasn't really giving energy. It was taking it, even though we loved the taste of it. So we kind of decided that, oh, we can live without it. We'll probably have it every now and again, but we won't be doing this. I don't think we'll ever pig out on it again like we just did a few weeks ago.
Yeah, you're making me really really hungry right now. Want to have some durian for sure.
Have
Um,
you tried any, Ronnie?
yeah, I've been in probably the best I've had. Although this is the thing that with durian, there's all these levels to durian. So I've been
For
to
sure.
um, I've been to Thailand. So I've been to Chiang Mai in Thailand, and I had
Yes.
the normal durian there, but also the Gan Yao was probably the better durian, the smaller one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when I've told people that, like for example, Lindsay, who is the durian writer,
The expert.
Lindsay, well, yeah, and when I said that to her, she said, "Well, you've not really tried durian, you know." So
No, no,
there's this like
no. It's true.
there's this like durian uh, snobbery kind of thing where I've not really tried the best durians, but
It's true.
I still love it. You know, I still love what I've tried.
Yeah, yeah, because I think the most common durian in Thailand you'll find is the montong, which means the
Yes,
golden pillow, and the
yeah.
ganyao, which is the one you tried. And there's another one as well. Slipped my mind what it is, but there's three of them that you can get, and they're kind of proliferous everywhere. But the ones you want to get, I mean, they're not the best ones. They're really not the best durians.
Hmm.
But if you ask in a market for durian ban in
Mhm.
Thailand, and you get these, I honestly, I don't speak Thai. I don't know quite where I picked up this word durian ban. Ban, to best of my knowledge, it means village in in Thai. But whether or not that's what it means when you say durian ban, I'm probably saying it completely wrongly. But they tend to know what I'm talking about in the markets when I ask for durian ban, and I get some local small variety that's not none of the main three. It's not commercially produced. It's durian off somebody's tree, and they're just so superior in quality. And quite
mm.
honestly, once you've tried those, the montongs and the ganyals, they don't do it for you, especially in Thailand. They're too heavily chemicalized, or I don't know, pumped full of something or other, hormones, probably.
Excellent. No,
Yeah,
you, I'm kind of like you. Like I kind of like. I don't think about durian that much, but when just in this conversation, it's kind of reignited my desire to go and find this really good stuff. You know.
yep,
Um,
yep.
Here's another thing I want to ask you, Mango. In the film, you're barefoot. Have you been barefoot for a long time? Do you still live without shoes?
Yeah, me. When I was when I set off leaving Norway on my push bike, and uh, maybe 6 months into that journey, or maybe a bit more, 7 or 8 months into that journey, biking, I decided that I was going to bike barefoot. I've always been someone that's found shoes uncomfortable.
Mm.
Even when I was working with IBM as a system programmer, the first thing I would do when I got into my office in the morning was take my shoes up and stick them under the desk, and I would run around all day in my stockinged feet. And I've I kind of have always been doing that, running around barefoot as much as I can. But in the early 1990s, I decided that I was going to stop wearing shoes, and I basically haven't worn any since. I don't own any footwear. I haven't uh, worn shoes at all since I've been in Australia, which,
Wow.
as mentioned, was 2006 when I came here. Even in Sydney, I never wore shoes. I never. The only times that I've worn shoes since the year, I don't know, since the 1990s, the only times that I've worn shoes are when living in Spain. A lot of the supermarkets don't let you in unless you put footwear on. So I had a pair of cheap thongs or flip flops or whatever you call them,
Mm.
just to get me round for that occasion. But I would take them off straight away, and I find shoes very uncomfortable and restricting. I know that they really make the toes sort of go close together, whereas they should be
Yeah,
spread like this,
yeah, yeah.
and they're not good for your feet wearing shoes.
Hmm.
So I got my feet here. My toes are like well spread.
Wow. Yeah, that is
So
different.
and yeah,
That
and
is really different.
I'm spreading them at the moment, but even if I'm relaxed, they're like
Mm.
this. I can actually sort of grip the ground uh, when I'm walking. It just gives me more stability, and it's much healthier
Yeah,
not having any shoes.
it's like you've got a real padding there as well.
Yeah,
It's like a really thick padding, and
yeah,
you don't feel any pain or anything
yeah,
from
yeah.
walking on anything sharp or anything like that.
Oh, sure. I mean, my feet they still feel when it's a hot day and I go into town and I'm walking on a black tarmac. I have to walk fast because if I stand still, my feet will get burnt. If I'm walking on sharp rocks, especially it's early in the morning and maybe like when I go to the markets, some of the markets have got rocks in them. So, and I'm walking around, I find that I have to walk a little bit slower because my feet are sensitive to the rocks. It's very rare that I get a puncture, but I do sometimes. Can happen. You step on a sharp rock and you cut your feet, but my feet heal pretty quickly,
Hmm.
so generally not a problem. One thing that you notice if you're walking barefoot is your feet don't smell. If they're cooped
Hmm.
up in shoes all day, they're going to smell at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's just so liberating not having any shoes, and it's like it's like permanent foot zone therapy. So you're walking around and you're accessing all these uh, what do you call them, like power pressure points underneath the foot that you're
Yeah. Right.
pressing on. It's massaging all the time, so it's very healthy for your body to not wear shoes, and very unhealthy to wear shoes. So I wouldn't. I'll probably be the rest of my life. I can't see myself wearing shoes.
Amazing. Uh,
Yeah.
in your lifestyle, do you use any supplementation, any whatever vitamins, herbs, medicines, anything like that?
No, nothing at all. Nothing at all. I honestly, I don't believe in. I think that there may be, like, if you're living a kind of really sterile life and you're living in a city and you're getting everything that's been washed with chlorinated water, and that maybe there's some truth to that you might be needing B12. But my lifestyle is very outdoorsy, and uh, I don't always make sure everything is cleaned properly. If we've grown a tomato in the garden and it's fallen on the
Mm.
ground, and I'll still put it in my mouth. So I think things like B12, you're just sort of naturally getting it um, into your when you kind of living out in nature. I think that everything is more balanced. But I can tell you though, Ronnie, that back in the 1980s when I first became vegan, and I had been vegan for maybe 2 or 3 years, and I was teaching. I left my profession behind as a computer scientist, as it were, and I was doing other things. But one of the things I was doing was teaching English to a few different people, and one of them was a Hungarian doctor who was very concerned for me that I was only eating plant-based
Hmm.
food. She couldn't understand how come I could be alive still, and she was constantly trying to get me to come into her office so she could control my blood and make sure everything was good. And I kind of refused her to begin with, but eventually she persuaded me, and I said, okay, I'll come in because it was free of charge. She was offering me this whole kind of plethora of blood tests to check absolutely everything that she could think of to prove that I was uh, going to be sick from eating the way I was.
Hmm. Hmm.
And she took 3 vials of my blood. She sent them off for analysis. A couple of weeks later, I saw her, and she said to me she couldn't believe absolutely everything was perfectly normal. She couldn't believe my iron was to where it was supposed to be, and my calcium levels, and blah blah blah, all that. She said, and I got you here. She said your B12 is below normal. You should get B12 shots. You should get B12
Hmm.
tablets. You're not going to live much longer unless you do something with your B12.
Yeah.
And I I have always been someone who's kind of had faith in what I'm doing, really. And and this is not, by any way should it be construed as advice to anybody else. Everybody has got to find what's best for them and make their own choices. But for me, I decided I'm not really interested in what she says about my B12.
Hmm.
I feel fine, and I'm not going to bother changing my diet or supplementing, and I have not done. And that was in 1987. I've not done anything about it. I'm absolutely positive that if I went in to get my B12 um, tested today, that it would be below normal. And I think that nutritional science really has just scratched the surface. It doesn't really know much at all.
Yeah,
And yeah, go on.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, this is something that interests me because I've not taken B12 since being a vegan in 2011, but I've not been obviously vegan that long. But
Yeah,
there does seem to be a trend of people start off on a vegan diet and their B12 gets lower. And my question is that because we actually need less, or because um, we actually don't need as much? Maybe I don't. As once again, I'm not trying to give advice to people. I'm on my own experiment with it, but
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Well, Ronnie, I can't answer the question because I've absolutely no idea.
mm,
I don't understand, but I do trust that the body has its own innate wisdom, and it knows what it needs to do, and it knows what's best. And if I feed it the right kind of food, I don't see why it should have any problems. And I do theorize that people that are eating a more conventional diet, including cooked foods or including animal products, that those people maybe are going to need more B12 because of that. But exactly why, I don't know why. but I don't worry about it. I think that for me it seems to work fine, so I'm happy.
Yeah, and
And Chris is the same. My
Quentin's
partner,
the
she
same.
doesn't
Yeah.
also absolutely the same. She's been eating nothing but fruit since 1986. She doesn't have any B12. She did go to the doctors last year um, from a spider bite that she had, and that there was some blood taken, and the doctor found out that her B12 was way, way, way below, and told her you've got to take B12 tablets or get injections. But she's not doing that either. So yeah, I mean, I think that, as I say, nutritional science, it's barely scratched the surface. It knows about certain elements that are in the body. I'm sure there's still heaps more that have yet to be discovered.
Mhm.
It knows kind of how things are balanced on people that are eating a conventional diet. But has it studied people that are eating our natural diet, the diet that we were always meant to be
Mm.
eating, the diet that is most compatible with our physiology? No, I don't think it has. I don't think there is any real in-depth studies been done that show exactly how things should be. And maybe if it were, it would be proven that B12 is naturally much lower
Mm.
on people such as ourselves, that are eating more sanely.
So, just a quick one. Is there anything in particular you think people get wrong about the idea of a fruitarian diet, or misconceptions or myths, or is there anything you see people kind of perpetrate or talk about a lot that has frustrated you over the years, or you don't think is correct?
Yeah, maybe this goes back to a question that you asked earlier, really, about fruitarian, because I do tend to see fruitarianism um, as one of those words which has been uh, commandeered and changed and manipulated to suit people's needs, really. So whereas originally I think the idea of fruitarianism is uh, someone who's a fruitarian is someone who's eating basically purely fruit. Nowadays people call themselves fruitarian and they're eating predominantly fruit, and that
Mm.
predominantly might mean more than 50% or
Yeah,
60%. They've
yeah.
got their own idea of what percentage it is that construes being a fruitarian. So 70, 80, 90% fruit means fruitarian. So this is why within my books I've coined this new term, Eden fruitarianism, because I don't really want to argue with people and say what fruitarian is or isn't. People can have their own ideas. I'm not, it's like the word vegetarian originally only meant people that ate from the vegetable kingdom,
Mm.
but nowadays you
Yeah.
get only people eating cheese and eggs, but chicken and fish as well, and they're
Hmm.
calling themselves vegetarians. And I think fruitarian has been corrupted in the same way. So my term that I'm using is called Eden fruitarianism, which is features throughout all of my books, and it's all about really focusing on not just diet, but it's a whole lifestyle change. And part of that lifestyle change is the recognition of fruit being the only food which is karmically given freely, and the only food which
Mm.
has the potential to gotten without any harm being done to any life forms. It's a potential. So that's kind of where I'm at with fruitarianism. But there's an awful lot more that I see walking barefoot as I do. That's a crucial part of the Eden fruitarian lifestyle. Uh, just just living back to nature more, getting out of the cities, uh,
Mm.
breaking free of whatever hold society has on us, recognizing that we've all been indoctrinated by society, by television, by schooling, by magazines, by media, and breaking away from all of that and just becoming more natural versions of ourselves, the way that we were always meant to be, just like becoming free again,
Mm.
liberating ourselves. I know there's
Brilliant.
a lot of people don't like the word feral, but I love the word feral. It's a domesticating animal which has once more regained its wild nobility. And
Mm.
for me, I think this really sums up where we should be at. There's nothing wrong with being feral. Feral is great. It just means we're untaming ourselves. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think that's what Eden fruitarianism, that's what it's all about. It's untaming ourselves.
I like it. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your books a little bit. I was only aware of one, which I've read, Destination Eden, but you were saying that you've got another three books. How about tell us a little bit about all those books and what's in them, and you know.
Destination Eden is my first one, which you've read, yeah, and that basically it basically explains what I mean by the term Eden Fruitarian.
Mm.
Um, but following the publication of Destination Eden, I had a lot of people writing to me, questioning things that I'd put in there, um, querying things, just about the whole way I was thinking. So I wrote my next book, which was called uh, the Eden Fruitarian Guidebook, which is quite a bit thicker than Destination Eden, so there's a lot more to read there. It's probably my favourite of the four books that I've written is the guidebook, the Eden Fruitarian Guidebook. It covers a lot more to do with plant sentience and recent research which has been done into proving that plants are more than just life forms which have no feelings at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, they're lives in their own right. They're here for their own purpose, and that's really what that's one chapter in the guidebook. It's also got the first chapter is dedicated to the animals, which I see as a crucial in all my books. I lay out this foundation that veganism is like a moral baseline
mm,
for everything to build on. And if you haven't got that, I think everything else will crumble.
mm,
So you've got to have this sort of baseline of at least understanding that animals are not there to be exploited. And if you can't understand that, you're not really going to understand that plants are there for their own reasons as well. But anyway, it's the second book. There's a lot more to it too. I am an anarchist at heart, so I do
mm.
talk about things that about the government, and I talk about other things like that. That's the second book. That's the Eden Fruitarian Guidebook. My third book is basically autobiographical. It covers the first 31 years of my life, um, up until days before awakening to the idea of raw food. And the part two of that is in the pipeline. It will cover the next 30 years, the next 3 decades of that. I haven't really started on it yet, but it will happen. Touch wood, all things if they go as planned. Part two will be out in a couple of years. And the fourth book, which I only just published last month, is called 2020 Vision,
Mm-hmm.
Veganism Plus Plus. And it really it focuses on what we can do beyond from a vegan perspective, what we can do beyond simply cutting out animal products from our diets and lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
and recognizing there's a whole load of other things that vegans in general consume
Mm-hmm.
which are causing unnecessary harm to the environment and to wildlife and flora and fauna. uh, for example, sugar. Most people would
Right.
recognize sugar as being a vegan product. They wouldn't be questioning that. But if you look, especially living here in Australia, you can see how many square kilometers sugarcane plantation takes up, and how totally unnatural it is to the landscape, and how very, very destructive it is. It's cutting down rainforest. It's like all monocrops. In the end, it's serving towards the desertification of Earth, which is going to cause climate change and it's basically aiding towards the destruction of the Earth. So anyway, that's just one of the things, but it's also a call to anarchy, really,
Mm.
this third book, which even though I've only had it out for now just over a month, I'm getting some really good feedback about that book. So yeah, that's the fourth one. So
Thanks. Yeah, thank
have
you
a
very
read,
much.
Ronnie.
Yeah, and where
Yeah.
can we get those? Is that Amazon? Is it your website, or where could we get those potentially?
Probably on Amazon. You can get them directly from Amazon, but my website is fruitnut.net,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, if you go to fruitnut.net, it's got all my books on there. You can also read reviews about them that people have put on Amazon and Goodreads, and they've sent me personal emails and things. So yeah, I feel very kind of flattered, really, that I gotten so many beautiful feedback, so much beautiful feedback about my books. I consider myself a simple man and just somebody who wants to try and be a better person, a better version of myself, and just get on with my life. And I feel that because the universe has blessed me with such an abundance in many ways, and such a beautiful lifestyle, sort of now creating my little Eden here on earth, that my book writing is part of my it's a means for me to repay the universe for all the goodness that it's given me.
Wow.
That's the way I just, I really feel, I feel so blessed in my life. And because I feel like I've had like revelation after revelation that I've experienced, and I just, and I think when you do have revelations that are very deep, you have a duty to share them with other people, and that's what I'm trying to do in my books. I'm trying to share insights and things that I've had throughout my life,
Well, that's
because I
wonderful.
think that,
Sorry.
yeah, just think that it can help everybody through understanding things and seeing things from a different light.
Well, I feel like that's a perfect place to bring this interview to a close. And I've really enjoyed it, Mango. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And I think a lot of people will hopefully get a lot out of your insights. And if for those who are listening and watching, this is a regular podcast. We hope to bring you more people who are interested in a fruitarian diet, and you can check out the podcast online. If you're interested in learning more about a fruitarian or raw vegan diet in the UK, then we have the UK Fruit Fest coming up this year from the 21st to the 28th of July, and you can find out more information about that at fruitfest.co.uk. And if you have any feedback, or you'd like us to interview Mango again, or you'd like to find out about his books or whatever, feel free to get in touch with us, or check out Mango and his information at fruitnut.net, and you can find his books as well at Amazon. And also highly recommend checking out the film Pure Fruit for those of you looking for a little bit of inspiration along the way. Mango, anything you want to finish with before we bring this interview to an end?
No, I think it's been good, Ronnie. I much appreciate you getting in touch with me, and I'm quite happy to chat with you anytime when I got time. Thank you very much for helping spread this message of Eden Fruitarianism.
Awesome.
That's appreciated.
Thanks very much, Mango, and thank you for listening, everyone. And we'll see you in the next and hear you in the next episode of the Love Fruit Podcast. Thank you very much.